World Cancer Day is celebrated, all over the world, and it is to enlighten and give information and see how, cancer can actually be tackled in every society. Now, today, World Cancer Day is observed on February 4th this year, and the aim is to inform and encourage people on its prevention, its early detection, and the treatment. And this initiative was actually taken by the Union for Campaign and Advocate for the targets of the World Cancer Declaration signed in 2008. The new World Cancer Day 2022 through 2024 campaign has the theme Close the Care Gap, which actually means from 2022, 2023, 2024, it's just a one theme, close the care gap. But for this year, I think it has to do with early detection. Yes, this is what cancer is all about. But before we go into it, let's take a look at this particular report.
Cancer refers to a very life-threatening, debilitating condition where cells in the body, which are not supposed to multiply unmitigatedly, start multiplying, and they multiply in an unregulated manner. And after some time, they start spreading through different routes to other parts of the body, causing significant dysfunction and harm to the host. The problem with cancer is that it can affect any cell in the body. Deriving from that, cancer may affect the eyes, the brain, the chest, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, any part of the body. No part of the body, as far as it has living cells, is spared. It is very common and is a significant cause of morbidity and mortality. In the African population, with Nigeria contributing the most, 1 in every 5 Africans are Nigerian, it's important to know that Nigeria also contributes a significant burden to the cancer prevalence. Significant burden to cancer prevalence. It is also important to remember that the facilities and the cost implication for managing patients who have cancer is also a significant burden to either the families or the healthcare sector at any point in time. But before all of that, the question is, how common is cancer? Cancer, there are difficulties with assessing different epidemiological values and the rest, but it's important to remember that there are certain claims that as much as 10 to 30,000 Nigerians are diagnosed with cancer every day. Now, this number in 200 million is a significant percentage. Some of these people may not have access to healthcare intervention, and when they do, they are unable to afford these interventions. So cancer risk factors would include things that you can do something about and things you cannot do anything about. So modifiable risk factors are things like exposure to cigarette, large quantities of alcohol consumptions, exposure, sedentary lifestyle, where patients are inactive. People who are obese have a higher risk factor of developing cancer, exposure to radiations, exposure to UV radiations, exposure to nuclear radiations. Even patients who work, people who work in the radiology department in different sectors of the economy, the health sectors and the mining sectors and other sectors. People who are also exposed to certain infections. It's been known that liver cancer, for example, is typically mostly caused by hepatitis B and hepatitis C. Other forms of cancers, like cancer of the bile duct, have also been related to certain types of biliary worm infestations. Cancer of the skin has been seen to be higher in people who have low pigmentation, things like people who may have 1 or 2 forms of albinism, and people who work in the open under the sun and are exposed to UV radiations are more also at risk of developing cancers. People who work in certain industries like the dye industry are also at risk of, because of exposure to carcinogenic materials, are also at risk. People who are in certain businesses, like the entertainment businesses, where they are exposed to steady amounts of cigarette smoking, whether directly or indirectly, and people who smoke generally, because cigarette, for example, has been shown to have as much as 5,000 cancer-causing materials, which we call carcinogens. So this, to a large extent, can also increase the risk of patients developing cancer. Some people may have an inherited risk factor to develop cancer. So patients who have a family history of colon cancer may also have their relatives being at risk. Patients who have breast cancer may also have their relatives also being at risk. Patients who have ovarian cancer may also have their relatives being at risk. It's also important to also not forget that patients who are engaged, who in the course of maybe other forms of treatment have need transplant surgery. So, for example, patients who have been exposed to transplant surgeries will require medications that reduce their immunity, and therefore these patients are also at risk of cancer. Patients who have low immunity, like patients who have HIV and are not taking medications, and because of that low immunity, their body, in the body, they are also at risk of developing certain forms of cancers. The key thing is that whatever form of cancer a person develops, there are presentations. Some of the presentations and clinical presentations are usually as a result of the local effect of the cancer, the distant effect of the cancer within the body, and then whether the cancer is involved in producing one or two active chemicals, which may be hormones or otherwise. So sometimes patients who have cancer in certain parts of the body would have symptoms that are related to pressure from the mass effect. So patients who have cancers of the throat will have difficulty swallowing because it will be obstructing the free flow of fluid or water. Patients who have cancer of the intestine may have some form of constipation. Patients who have cancers of the urinary tract, like prostate cancer, they may have problems with urinating. Whatever it is, the symptoms will be significantly related to the part of the body that is affected. Now, other symptoms may be as a result of a spread from one part of the body to another. So a patient may have a colon cancer in one part of the body, but because it has spread to the lungs, patients may have problems with breathing and all of that. Now, cancers, even when they present, commonly some cancers will present without any symptom, totally without any symptoms. At this stage, the only way some patients may find it is if, on presenting to the hospital for other health complaints, these cancers are incidentally discovered. In other situations, if, for example, a patient decides to do a general checkup, the patient may again discover some cancers. And then there are some situations where, due to age and gender, there are certain routine screenings for cancers that are very common. So cancers of the prostate, for example, they are advocates that a regular screening, because in men, this risk of this cancer increases with age and may be tied to higher levels of a blood detected chemical called the prostate specific antigen. In the case of women, cancer of the cervix is one preventable cancer that can be picked up early. And to do that, patients typically would require regular pap smear to a large extent. So then patients who may have hepatitis B or C, because of the risk of liver cancer, will require regular screening to a large extent. So it's important to understand that there are certain cancers that are found in certain parts of the body, but screening is critical and important in detecting them. And then not to forget colon cancer. In fact, it's statutory required that people engage in a screening for colon cancer in a timely manner. So some patients, it's recommended that they get screening every 10 years if they are doing a colonoscopy, where a pipe is passed through the backside to visualize all part of the large intestine in search of cancer. Now, irrespective of whatever cancer a patient may have, it's important to understand that the time of presentation is critical. So a cancer may present either in the early stage or in the late stage. Now, at the early stage, there's a small chance that there's some chance that permanent cure and remission of the cancer can be achieved with radical treatment. But in the late stage, when it has spread to different parts of the body, it's typically difficult to achieve cure. Most times, what the patient will be offered is palliative intervention, where the patient will get some chemical treatment in the form of chemotherapy, some radiation treatment in the form of radiotherapy, and other interventions that may help reduce the chance or the speed with which the patient loses vitality and dies off. So, to a large extent, because of the variety of cancers that may be present, interventions would depend on what type of cancer it is and the understanding of the cancer. In a nutshell, it's important to remember that early identification of and diagnosis of cancer is critical in achieving cure. But be that as it may, it is important to also put to note that there are preventive measures that reduce the risk of cancer. Some of these preventive measures may be generalized and some may be specific to certain cancers. For example, example of generalized preventive measures means just healthy living. Some of those healthy livings we all know about, things like exercising regularly reduces the risk of cancer. Maintaining a healthy body weight using the body mass index calculation, which your doctor can do for you, is also critical in ensuring that patients reduce their risk of cancer. Then avoiding those agents that cause cancer, things like cigarette smoking, is also critical. At this point, it's important that I clearly spell out that there are two kinds of cigarette smoking, two general groups. You have primary smoking and secondary smoking. So primary smoking means that the patient involved is actually or was actually a smoker. But secondary smoking is also a very passive form of smoking, where the person involved is sometimes aloof and does not understand the risk he or her is being exposed to. But to contextualize it, allow me to say that if you are in a room where you have people smoking and you sit there and quite a number of people are smoking and you sit there for 1 hour, you would have consumed between 10 to 20 sticks of cigarette. You have not taken a cigarette, you have not held a cigarette, you have not dragged and inhaled it, but by the mere fact of sitting there, you are passively inhaling smoke. And that in itself is passive smoking. And the risk for cancer for patients who are passively smoking is no different from those people who are also smoking directly. So it's important to remember that fact. The high intake of alcohol is also very, very, very important and very common, and a risk factor, especially for liver cancer in patients with other forms of infection. Early exposure to hepatitis viral infection, hepatitis B and hepatitis C infections are also very critical to developing liver cancer. So it means that preventive measures will involve things like the use of vaccination, hepatitis B vaccination, and early treatment of hepatitis B and hepatitis C, and the avoidance of alcohol. These three things to a large extent reduce. And then a fourth factor, the exposure to aflatoxin. In fact, it has been recently reported that some granules in the sub-Saharan Africa were found to have high levels of mycotoxin. Mycotoxin is a product of the mycotoxin, or aflatoxin specifically, is a product of a fungus called Aspergillus fumigatus. Now, this produces fungal spores which contaminate granite and are found in significant levels, and they have been shown to contribute significantly to liver cancer in the African population. And in fact, recently we were told that some of our exported granules were reversed, were denied access in certain parts of the world, in other parts of the world, because of high levels of mycotoxins. So it's important that we put this in perspective. Other forms, other preventive measures like reduction of radiation. So for people who are working in radiological departments, it's important that they regulate their exposure, they take the necessary measures and exposure. For patients who have albino, for albino patients who have albinism, it's important that when they go out in the sun, they are well protected, they are well covered up, they will use their sunshades, and they use their proper clothing to avoid unnecessary exposure. If all these measures are taken, including others that I may not have mentioned, and a patient still develops cancer, it's important that because we are a highly religious society, and because we do not have a very, very organized health system, patients take a long time before they present in facilities where they can get proper care. It is important that in as much as you go to the church to pray and you go to the mosque to pray for your miracle, you should also do the right thing and get proper health advice from a doctor in a proper health facility, so that you can be referred appropriately. Most health facilities do not have what it takes to treat cancer or even to make a diagnosis of cancer, so you would require a referral. So presenting in any health facility with proper referral can reduce the delay before the marked spread of the cancer, which makes it more difficult and more expensive to treat.
All right, well, there you have it. We're given, these tips on how to ensure that we live a healthy life to avoid contracting, this cancer thing. I mean, that's one of the deadliest diseases all over the world. And today is dedicated to creating that awareness to ensure that people, close the gaps in terms of getting screening tests, in terms of getting the vaccines, and also making the healthy choices that we need to make to protect ourselves and also our loved ones.
Yes, now the thing is, it's quite a large number, but 10 million people actually die from cancer every year. And this is actually more than HIV, tuberculosis, from any kind of disease. So this is the reason why we need to do as much as we can to protect ourselves. If you look at, in the whole year, there are lots of days set out for cancer. We have the Cancer Awareness Month on October that comes on October, and then just for almost every month there's something that has to do with cancer awareness, because there are different kinds of cancer, and it is not a joke, it is not funny at all. Now, and there's actually a projection that by 2030 cancer deaths would rise by 13 million. That's if we don't act and if nothing is actually done about it.
So, I mean, that's an alarming figure, and it's, it's a pointer to the fact that we all need to live that, healthy lifestyle. I mean, you heard the doctor talking about, excess smoking, drinking carelessly, for those who take that for granted. I mean, you need to watch out for your health. So it's not just about, getting high all the time, but, it's very important that you take time to watch your health, because trust me, people that may suffer the implication of that may not necessarily be you, but people around you. You are likely to have a family, and then just when they need you most.
I actually know of someone, it's not possible that, where we are right now, in the world we are today, there's someone that doesn't know someone who actually died from cancer. Just recently, I lost a secondary school classmate, to breast cancer, and it is no respecter of age. That's it. Cancer is no respecter of age. You could be young and still have cancer. You could be a child and still have cancer. You could be aged and still have cancer. And it is no respecter of where you are, because there's a report that 65% of cancer cases now is from developing countries, because there's this myth that it's only rich people that catch cancer or have cancer and everything. No, according to this particular report, more than 65% of cancer that's happened in, developing countries. So, if you're, it doesn't even matter. Even if you're in a rural community, you can actually still catch cancer. You're susceptible to cancer.
So it's very important that we, take time to do that. I mean, always, create that habit of, getting screening all the time to detect early enough, because you don't want to let it get to a point where it cannot be treated, at a very advanced stage, and then it becomes detected. That will be a problem in itself. And also, also for authorities to make sure that people living with cancer have access to good health care, services, and as well as on our own part as individuals, they say prevention is better than cure. So
increase understanding as well, understanding of everything that has to do with cancer, and these are the only ways that we can actually, bring a change.
Yeah. So healthy living is very important. Our choices when it comes to what we eat, what we drink, all of that is very important in protecting us, from cancer.